it's just past 12 o'clock in Glasgow, in Scotland, and I would like to welcome everyone for the Week 5 summary video. In this video, I will give a short reflection on some of the questions raised in Weeks 4 and 5. First of all, I would like to talk about the notion of ethics, morality, and legality, or law. I was talking about these three concepts in three different languages. And in every language, it is incredibly difficult to distinguish between ethics and morality. But it seems to be even more difficult in English than in the other languages. I think that there are several reasons for this. First of all, we talk about a moral act, and when we make a noun out of it, then it becomes morality, which is a bit difficult to pronounce. And we also have another meaning of the word moral, which is the moral of the story, so what we learned from a fable and similar things. Now, I think that therefore, simply when we talk about moral behavior, we simply replace it with ethical behavior in English, which is fine, because very often we can say that they have very similar meanings and so on. However, if we go within the discipline of ethics, then these concepts are very strictly defined. So ethics is the discipline of right and wrong, or discipline of what is good and evil and so on. Now, the moral behavior or the morality would be about the behavioral aspect, so a person wanting to do the right thing. It is not philosophizing about why that thing is the right thing to do or not. Now, therefore, there are other conceptualization of ethics and morality, and one was offered in the course as well, and it is that the morality is about the individual and the ethics is about the group or wider, so a larger number of people. Now, if we take this conceptualization apart, we will see that in everyday language, they will almost always mean the same, but only almost. In terms of their consequences. However, what is important is that if I, for example, had a student of decision making and that student confuses the two or uses one instead of the other, I would say that's fine, that can go because it is enough for the decision making discipline. But if it was my student of ethics, I would probably fail that student if he or she uses the wrong conceptualization. Now, what adds even more to this complexity is that we have the notion of the normative regulation or the law. So, for example, if it is illegal to steal bread, then it does not matter whether you find it morally adequate or not. It is illegal. So the fine regulation, the ethics, the morality do not apply. That is, of course, the first take on this. So all these things are becoming more and more complex as you get deeper into it. Because it might be illegal to steal bread, but if you are stealing the bread because you want to feed your child, then you might be morally justified, although legally not. So you will still go to jail, but you will feel good about that. So we have a couple of more concrete questions also from the area of ethics. For example, Michael Bremer talks about the Divine Chocolate company who are producing high quality products on fair trade basis from the producers in Ghana, and the German manufacturer pays social premium for the building of schools, wells, and so on. Perhaps social premium could become standard for reporting on companies' social responsibility. But, and here is the tricky question, can we talk about ethical or moral behavior if we have a legislation for it? The real answer is no, because then it is not matter of choice whether you want to sponsor a school because it is the right thing to do. No, if you have to do it because of the law binds you, then it is not question of morality at all. There are lots of comments in the course about the notion of corporate responsibility. And what we managed to discuss, and it is worth really reading these discussions, is that corporate social responsibility is very often used as a marketing tool. And in that case, it has nothing to do with ethics or morality. However, it often happens that you just put corporate social responsibility into a department, and that's their job to do that. If it is not everyone's job, then it is not about moral behavior. There are also a couple of questions that are digging much deeper into the notion of responsibility, and that's Charlotte Brady's comment interesting here. We obviously don't want to be in a heavy relationship with a company only to find out that they are toxic, but the responsibility of the first person that they contact, who showcases us, whose job it is to depend on increasing interactions. So is it the responsibility of the first person they talk to? Is it those who agreed to collaborate with them? Is it about the responsibility of people who sort their administrative things out? It is not written down in anyone's job description. Yes, that is why the notion of responsibility is so incredibly difficult. There are no good answers to this. I cannot say whose responsibility it is, and I don't think that any sane person could do that. It is in some ways everyone's responsibility, but what is really important is asking these questions. Because if we are looking into that, then that means that we are trying to adhere to some sort of moral principles that we have. Very interesting question from Christine McGrew in terms of education. In universities, who are the stakeholders? Parents paying fees, none in Scottish universities, local authorities, students, central government, taxpayers, private investors, all pay grade staff, unions. I could even continue this list because, for example, the companies in which those people we educate will work later, they can also be perceived as stakeholders. And the answer is yes, all of these are stakeholders as long as you can perceive them. That's the easy way to identify your stakeholders, those that you can perceive and those then who can perceive you. Because that's if you don't know about them, you cannot consider them to be stakeholders. Haley Johnson and Malcolm Rutherford were running an interesting discussion about the notion of failure and especially the tolerance of failure. So what kind of failure are we tolerating? Is it a product failure, wasted funds, damaged environment, mass redundancies, and so on? When we talk about the tolerance in failure in this context, we were talking about the organization tolerating the failure of the individuals. So it is primarily a kind of performance failure, but we can explore the notion quite a lot further. For example, if someone makes a mistake in your organization, should you fire that person or not? Should we have a second chance or not? So this is all linked into this notion of failure, and there are many different aspects of it. And there were a couple of questions relating to the notion of intellectual courage. I think that a number of people did not perceive it as particularly belonging here. And for example, Pete Thompson says, perhaps the profit motive is seen to devaluate bravery in business context. Bravery is often needed in business, and business is a very tough world. Victor Forrester adds that what are the ethics, morality of a manager who says behind the authority of his business position that I believe it will work. The stress here is on I. And he continues that what are the ethics, morality to be learned from Nobel Awards, funded as they are from investment gained from profits of war. Of course, these are all very relevant and very interesting questions. What is important about the intellectual courage is that it applies for you. You are risking your own existence in the world of business. You are risking your wealth, your income, your position, very often your reputation as well. And when you want to look at it in the much more complex way what you are suggesting here, then it can really be examined properly only if you consider it together with the notion of responsibility. So that's exactly with Victor's question here. If I say this will work and I take people on path to try to accomplish something new and so on, I'm risking their existence or not. I have some responsibility for my subordinates, or if I am the owner of the company, then for my subordinates. But what we can see is that entrepreneurs who put everything into that one single idea that they have, and they want to achieve something big, they want to change the world, they are risking primarily their own existence. And it is probably more heavy in some parts of the world than in some others. As half of the time passed, I'm now switching to the topic of globalization. Malcolm Rutherford again is asking, is globalization here to stay? Arguably, there was at least as much globalization there is now exactly 100 years ago. The world economy was remarkably integrated, and forward thinkers already believed that this interdependence made war unthinkable, or that if it occurred, it would be short and all the participants would be run out of money. History has taught us a lesson there. I think that the primary lesson that we can learn from history, from this example, but also if we look a couple of thousand years back, that the Phoenicians were traveling all over the world and trying to build up some sort of commercial empire, that we are interested as human beings in globalization. And I perfectly agree that this lesson of the war was teaching us something interesting, and especially that we had this experience of trying to be global. But there is a huge difference between the globalization of that time and of our times. That time, the globalization was only available to few, and the connections were taking long. So if you wanted to send something somewhere, it took long time. If you wanted to send a message, it took long time. What happens today is that the globalization is available to each and every individual. That's what we are doing here in this course. And that's why the MOOCs can be so personalized, because we are as individuals interacting in this course. So I think that this globalization is stronger, it is more widespread, and it is incredibly fast. And hopefully that leads to a better direction than in the previous case. The next question is from Jim Booth, who is asking about the ARM company. This is a company who builds microchips for mobile devices. And the question is, I'm trying to work out whether ARM is a multinational or a transnational corporation. There are very, very large number of questions like this, so I only selected a few. For example, Gerhard Saric is talking about, I used to work in the US Development Organization, which is an NGO, a non-government organization, that implemented various programs and projects around Eastern Europe, later in Africa and MENA countries. And the headquarters was in the US. However, managing and backstopping the activities was in the field, and I wonder whether this can be considered as a form of TNC, since their numbers rise continuously all across the globe. What are international NGOs? Where do they fall in? And there was another question from Malcolm Rutherford, which links here, which is thinking about this. I got wondering how much organizational structures of the TNCs are actually defined by the language as well as culture. Arguably, this is the case. This is the case in any organizational structure, but it perhaps a special feature for cross-culture or transnational ones. Now, what we can see from these questions is that there is no strict boundary between multinational, international, transnational, and it is to some extent based on our interpretation where we put them. Not always are even the business processes or non-business organization processes clear enough to make a single decision about whether it is a TNC or an MNC. Now, in terms of the ARM, I would think that it is a TNC, but I'm sure that there would be people who would argue against that. The NGOs are TN probably, but certainly not C. So they are not corporations. It is a different kind of organizations. And I think that this is one tendency that we are seeing more and more, that the notion of transnational corporation is extending beyond the notion of corporations, and it is all sorts of organizations becoming transnational. And obviously the mentioned example I would again regard as a transnational one. Now, where Malcolm gets into this question is about the organizational structures and how, to what extent it is determined by the local thing. It will be different from company to company and from country to country. So I know about organizations which have completely differently operating units in different countries. In some countries, you could regard them as multinational corporations. In some other countries, you could regard them as transnational corporations. So there are all sorts of mixes. And that's where Malcolm's question ends at, finally, a form of passive resistance that perhaps indicates that a hybrid model will become most common hierarchical TNC form. Now, I don't think that a particular hybrid model will become dominant. What I see is that is happening is that we are getting more colorful. There are lots of different models in terms of organizational structures or business processes, how we operate and so on. And I think that we will have a variety of these models which are all valid. Some will work for some, others will work for others, and hopefully work well for all of them. Another interesting thing was that a very large number of people talked about MOOCs in terms of globalization, which is obviously a hands-on example. So, for example, Helen Nichols says that I think globalization applies to MOOCs in its effect on educational establishments around the world. It is marvelous to be taught by professors from Harvard or MIT, but will this availability devalue the local university courses? Will universities employ fewer academic staff as they outsource teaching to online courses? Will salaries and benefits be reduced? These are all valid and very, very interesting questions. I don't want to get into a large number of examples about the MOOCs because there is enormous number of them that you addressed. All of them are building some sort of picture about the MOOCs, and as you use different approaches, different dimensions of investigating the MOOCs, it is building a very nice and very rich picture about them. Now, we are criticized often about those who oppose the MOOCs, that do you have any business model? How you justify that your MOOC is beneficial? Are we not committing some sort of business suicide? The only answer is no, I don't know. We really don't have a business model why the MOOCs are good for example, Strathclyde University. But what we need to know is that by the time we find out whether MOOCs have a legitimate business model, it will be too late to start making MOOCs. So the only way to cope with it, which we have found viable, is to start doing a couple of MOOCs, pilot them, try it out, how it works, what kind of consequences it has, and then we will see whether we can find a business model to support it. And if we do, we will continue. If we don't, we might choose some other path. But obviously, new and different possibilities are arising all the time. The next question from Helen Jones is about, I wonder if this is only superficial and deeper cultural values and the differences are intact, so that certain similarity is happening in the globalized world and also in terms of the MOOCs. What I can tell you in terms of, that's why we talk about localization always next to globalization, because what I see is that, for example, from my personal experience, is that I became much more interested in my own culture since I was becoming more and more global, and I have more respect to my own, to the cultural values of the environment in which I was born and in which I grew up. And at the same time, obviously, it is a growing respect to other cultures. I don't believe that you can have real respect to your own culture unless you respect other cultures as well. And the final question for today would be that I fully understand the concept, driver and measurement of globalization, but not able to associate how we imply validity into globalization. So again, it is about the trigger concept, which is always a bit tricky, and you are often having questions of why this is the trigger concept. This is the essence of the trigger concept. What I wanted to achieve with this trigger concept, is to throw you off track, because that opens your mind. It is a kind of Zen-like teaching style to give you something unexpected, which opens your mind so that you can take in a lot more and a greater variety of things. Now, at one point when I was building the model of this course, I even had validity as a trigger concept in all 4 areas, because different aspects of validity can be applied. But I certainly wanted to have it somewhere because it is a very important concept. Now, in terms of the globalization, the validity works, for example, space-wise very nicely. Something that you build works in one place, will it work in another place? For example, we have video communication available for a very, very long time. It is almost nowhere used in the world. But if you go to Tokyo, you will see everyone on the street with their mobile phones not glued to their ears as here, but in their hands, because they are having video conversations all the time. So that would be a nice example that it worked there, it was valid there, but this validity could not be expanded to the rest of the world. As our time is up, thank you very much for listening, and see you next week.